I was the only one who went to the hospital, while the others were just waiting for news of their mother's death to read the will. Late afternoon at County Memorial Hospital, Nathan Russo sat quietly by the hospital bed, holding his mother's gradually cold hand. For the past 3 days, he's been there, alone, wifeless, no brothers and sisters. There was only the steady sound of the monitor and the figure of the old mother quietly walking to the final boundary. But before she closed her eyes, she whispered something. A secret kept for more than 20 years, enough to tear off the masks of an entire family. The fluorescent lights in County Memorial Hospital emitted a gentle, steady hum, covering the room in cold white. Nathan Russo sat quietly on a plastic chair next to the hospital bed, his hands clasped together, his eyes never leaving the heart rate monitor. The steady, ticking sound sounded like a countdown clock. Each sound sounded like a reminder that his mother, Mrs. Eleanor Russo, was gradually leaving. He rubbed his eyes for the 5th time in less than an hour. Pick up your phone to check, still nothing. No text, no call. Nurse Patel, who took care of his mother during the last days of her life, stepped forward to adjust the IV tube. She gently asked, "Are your brothers and sisters on their way?" Nathan forced a smile, a pale smile full of bitterness. "I called them yesterday. They said they would come." But 3 days have passed since Mrs. Eleanor's condition suddenly deteriorated. 3 days, Nathan sat here, alone, holding his mother's hand. His wife, Vanessa, excused herself from being busy preparing for a fundraising event so she couldn't come. "The schedule is tight, I understand," she said over the phone. Anthony's brother promised to fly back from Chicago, but that ticket was probably never used, and Diana, the busy younger sister, only sent a short message daily. The children were busy with school, the family had work to do, and couldn't leave. Nurse Patel pulled back the covers for Eleanor. "The doctor said there might not be much time left. Do you want me to help contact them again?" Nathan shook his head. "They already know." He looked down at the face of the mother who sacrificed her life for her family. After her father passed away, she raised her 3 children alone, worked 2 jobs, and never complained, even though her health was getting weaker. And now, when she was about to leave, he was alone here. The phone vibrated again. Message from Vanessa. "How's it going? The gala's getting ready to be so busy. The Williamson family doubled their sponsorship if we named the silent auction after them. Talk to you later." Not a word to ask about his mother. Not a single word shared. It's all about society and reputation. Nathan put the phone in his pocket and did not answer. Their marriage had been cold for a long time, but today, the day his mother was dying, her absence was like a knife ending. He is 42 years old, build a construction company from scratch, buy a house in Lakeside Heights, give your wife everything she wants. But now, he sat alone in the hospital, watching his mother prepare to die. The door opens. The doctor walked in, looked at the equipment, then looked at Nathan sadly. "You should say goodbye." As if awakened by that sentence, Eleanor's eyes opened slightly. "Nathan," she whispered, her voice so weak that it was almost inaudible. "I'm here, Mom." He grabbed her hand and sat close. "I have been with my mother from the beginning until now." A faint smile appeared on her lips. "Those kids, are they coming?" Nathan swallowed his tears and lied softly. "On my way, Mom." But Eleanor's morphine-clouded eyes still lit up unexpectedly. She looked at him for a long time, then sighed, No, they won't come. She held his hand and squeezed gently. It's okay, Mom. I need to tell you something. She signaled him to bend down, and when Nathan leaned closer, she whispered, The bottom drawer of the desk. The key is taped under the jewelry box. What you see in there will explain everything. Nathan frowned. What did you say, Mom? Do you promise me that you will open it? I promise. She breathed a sigh of relief and leaned back on the pillow. You are always the strongest, just like your father. Her voice became weaker, then completely silent. A long beep sound from the monitor rang out in a straight line. The doctor rushes in, but Nathan already knows Eleanor Russo is gone. Nathan stood silently in the empty hospital room. Only the dull sound of the air conditioner remained, and the white light on the ceiling still glared emotionlessly. He squeezed his mother's hand, which gradually became colder. Nurse Patel walked over, her eyes heavy. In her hand was a cream-colored envelope, carefully sealed. The old lady told me to give this to you when the time comes. Nathan took it, his hand shaking. On the envelope was his mother's familiar handwriting, neat, delicate. To Nathan. He didn't open it right away. He's not ready enough. It started to get noisy in the hallway. Anthony and Diana finally arrive. The two walked quickly towards the hospital room, neatly dressed, with tears in their eyes, as if they had just experienced a great tragedy. But Nathan doesn't need to look long to know it's all scripted. We want to see Mom, Diana exclaimed. It's late, Nathan said, his voice cold as ice. She's gone. Diana collapsed onto a nearby chair, tears flowing like a faucet. We tried to get there as quickly as possible. The traffic was terrible. Anthony adjusted his expensive tie. Not everyone can skip work for days like you, Nathan. Behind them, Vanessa appeared. Branded evening gown, carefully combed hair, forced expression. I come as soon as I can, she whispered, not daring to look her husband in the eyes. Nathan looked at all three, his relatives, then at the envelope in his hand. Everything comes too late. Strangely, he wasn't angry anymore, just empty. A hospital employee stepped forward, holding a clipboard. My condolences to the family. But we need to discuss some post-mortem procedures. Anthony, Diana, and Vanessa immediately followed that person, arguing as they walked which funeral home to choose, what the cost is, who is in charge of what. As for Nathan, he quietly turned away. Inside the car, he opened his mother's letter. Dear Nathan, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I'm sorry to leave you with this burden, but you deserve to know everything. He read slowly, each word piercing his heart. The enclosed key leads to the safety deposit box at First National Bank. It contains all the evidence that Anthony, Diana, and even Vanessa have been secretly stealing from you and me for years. The family company your father left behind, Anthony said he sold at a loss to help his mother, is worth millions. The trust fund they said was depleted was transferred to an overseas account. Even your construction company was hacked. Nathan's heart sank. I never imagined this. You are not alone. Find Thomas Newberry in Millfield Town. He will help you understand everything. The letter ends with a familiar signature. Love you forever, Mom. The whole world seemed to shatter before Nathan's eyes. He no longer knows what is real, what has been hidden for many years. That evening, when he had calmed down, he returned to his mother's old house. As she said, the key was stuck under an old oak jewelry box. In the bottom drawer is a folder, neatly arranged, a USB stick, and a worn leather diary. The first documents Nathan opened were bank statements, land purchase documents, company contracts, and photos. The photos were of Anthony, Diana, and what made him dumbfounded was Vanessa meeting a man named Victor Blackwell, his mother's financial advisor, someone he once trusted. His phone vibrated. Message from Vanessa. "Where are you? The lawyer is waiting. The will is about to be read." Nathan looked at the screen and knew this battle had just begun. The law office of Bedford and Associates is located on the 3rd floor of an ancient stone building west of the city center. Nathan walked in, the file from his mother's drawer still in his pocket. No one in that room raised their heads to greet him, but he saw what they were thinking. Diana sat cross-legged, holding a cup of latte. Anthony was dialing the phone, frowning, looking impatient. Vanessa, standing next to the window, pretending to look at the street, but her hand was holding the strap of her designer bag so tightly that it turned white. "Finally," Diana said sarcastically, "some of us have other things." Lawyer Bedford, white hair, round glasses, coughed lightly. "Now that everyone is present, I would like to read the last will of Mrs. Eleanor Russo." The meeting room suddenly sagged. Nathan didn't say anything, just quietly sat in the nearest empty seat. The main asset, the house in Lakeside Heights, will be sold, with all proceeds donated to the National Cancer Research Foundation. Anthony jumped out of his chair. "What?" "The painting collection, which is highly valued, will be donated to the City Museum of Art." Diana gasped. She has already chosen the location to hang those paintings in her villa. Bedford continued, his voice steady. "The person appointed to run the entire estate is Mr. Nathan Russo." Vanessa shivered slightly. Anthony gritted his teeth. Diana blushed. "And Mr. Anthony and Miss Diana," Bedford raised his head and looked straight, "will each receive a symbolic sum of $1,000. The air in the room burst. "Unreasonable," Anthony shouted. "She's not in her right mind. I'll sue." "You influenced Mother when she was weak, right?" Diana turned to Nathan, her eyes wide. Bedford remained calm. "This will was signed by 2 doctors, who confirmed that Mrs. Eleanor was completed alert. In addition, there was also a video recording of her direct explanation." No one said anything anymore. The air was thick like rain before a storm. Vanessa was silent, a silence that was too unusual for a woman who always liked to control everything. After the meeting, she walked closer to Nathan, her eyes hesitant. "Tonight, shall we have dinner? Let's talk." Nathan looked straight into her eyes. "I'm not coming back. Don't wait." And he left without looking back. His car sped towards Millfield, the name mentioned in his mother's letter. A small town he visited as a child suddenly became a secret meeting place. The house number 14 Maple Street appeared at dusk, a simple wooden house with a carefully manicured front garden. When the door opened, an older man with white hair and familiar eyes stood there. "Are you Nathan?" he said, his voice warm and firm. "You look a lot like your father." Nathan was stunned. "You are Thomas Newberry?" "Yes, come in. We have a lot to talk about." The truth began to be revealed in the small rustic kitchen with 2 cups of hot coffee on the wooden table. "Your mother and I used to love each other before she even met your father," Thomas began, his voice slow. "Later, when her husband passed away, we met again. But she kept this secret because she feared her children's jealousy and misunderstandings. Nathan fell silent. Growing up, he had never heard the name Thomas. 3 years ago, your mother became suspicious. The money in the account disappeared. Anthony and Diana's explanations didn't convince her, so she hired a detective. Thomas pulled out an envelope. Inside were old photos, papers, statements. The same photo made Nathan feel his heart ache. His mother and young Thomas smiling brightly together. One more thing. Thomas looked at Nathan, his eyes heavy. It may be hard to accept, but Anthony and Diana are not your father's biological children. Nathan opened his eyes. What did you say? Your mother had a short marriage before meeting your father. When they got married, he adopted the other two, and you are the only child they have together. The atmosphere in the room became silent. It's not just about property, not just betrayal. This is the truth about his whole life. That night, Nathan drove home, his hands tightening on the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. My mind was reeling with jumbled memories. Every word his mother said, every photo Thomas gave, was like every knife slashing the curtain he thought was a peaceful life. When he opened the door and walked in, Vanessa was sitting in the living room. Glass of red wine swaying in hand, face makeup still perfect as always. But this time, Nathan did not see his wife anymore. Just seeing a stranger, so strange and cold. "Where have you been all day? I'm so worried," she said, her eyes showing fake concern. Nathan did not answer. He went straight to the bar and poured himself a glass of whiskey. "Are you worried?" he asked, his voice low and slow. "Really?" Vanessa stopped. Her expression momentarily faltered, but then quickly regained her composure. "Of course. Mom died, then the will reading. The whole day has been too much pressure." Nathan turned around, facing her. "So, let me ask you a question. Since when have you been working with Victor Blackwell?" The glass of wine almost fell out of Vanessa's hand. What are you saying?" "I asked." Nathan emphasized each word. "How long has it been since you and he, and Anthony and Diana, withdrew money from my company, my mother's account, the trust fund?" She stood up. "You have no proof." "No?" Nathan laughed dryly. "My mother has everything. Statements, fake contracts, my forged signature, money transfer from the company to an offshore account. Do you want to see it?" Vanessa's face began to change color. His eyes were cold, his gaze changed direction. "The roof has collapsed." "She never liked me," she growled. "From the beginning. Anthony and Diana told me. She always tried to control everything, including you. And you were always busy with work, not paying attention to how I felt." Nathan squeezed the glass in his hand. "She lent me money to buy this house. She treated me like a child. I betrayed her, and betrayed you." "We deserve it," Vanessa screamed. "Do you know what I had to do to get this position? I stood behind you to support everything. The company, the customers, the books. And you? You only know about your mother, about dead people." Nathan stepped forward, his voice sharp, not loud, but chillingly clear. "You touched something you weren't allowed to do, and tomorrow, the police will know everything." Vanessa stiffened. Her face was pale. "Are you threatening me?" I'm making an announcement." That night, Nathan heard her calling in the office. The voice was whispery and urgent. Sentences like "cancel everything," "switch accounts," "get out of there." When he woke up the next morning, the house was tranquil. The closet is empty, the jewelry box disappeared, and their joint bank account, the balance was only a few $100s. Vanessa ran away. Nathan stood in front of the FBI regional branch office, his hand clutching the leather bag containing the files his mother had painstakingly collected. Never in his life did he feel his steps were so heavy. Not because of fear, but because this was the first time he gave up trying to save the people who betrayed him. The young agent operating the reception desk looked up, intending to ask something, but when he saw Nathan's fierce gaze, he nodded and said, "Please, over here." In the interrogation room, Nathan opened his bag. Files, statements, fake contracts, photos, USBs, even recordings from private detectives, all neatly arranged on the table. "This is all the evidence my mother left behind," Nathan said, his voice as strong as steel. "His name is Victor Blackwell, and he doesn't work alone." The investigation began almost immediately. What Nathan didn't expect was that they had known about Blackwell for a long time. A professional, sophisticated organization that exploits the trust of the wealthy, especially middle-aged widows or families with large estates but lacks wealth management. "Your mother was the first to present concrete evidence," Agent Montgomery, who was in charge of the case, told Nathan. "But she did something even more important. She forced those inside the family to reveal themselves." Anthony was arrested at O'Hare Airport, Chicago, while checking in to board a plane to the Cayman Islands. A fake passport and more than $200,000 in cash were in his luggage. Diana was arrested at her lakeside villa. She was burning documents in the backyard. The papers were still smoking when the police entered. Vanessa has not been found yet, but her entire account has been frozen. Every transaction, contact, and movement is closely monitored. At his mother's funeral, Nathan stood alone at the grave. Old acquaintances came to offer their condolences, but no one dared to stay close to him for too long. The name Russo is now associated with a shocking financial scandal. But with Nathan, that no longer mattered. The sky was gray. The cold wind carried the smell of wet grass and withered flowers. When the ceremony ended, a hand was placed gently on his shoulder. "Are you Nathan Russo?" A woman's voice, calm but firm. He turned around. A tall woman with tied brown hair and a light gray shirt showed him the card. "Detective Laura Montgomery. We need to talk about your wife." They sat in a small cafe near the cemetery, with only the sound of the coffee grinder and rain outside the window. Blackwell was the lead, but Vanessa was the most valuable link, she said. "She has the information, the signatures, the access rights. If we catch her, this whole line will collapse." Nathan nodded. "I will help you." From there, the two began to work together, not as victims and investigators, but as two people who have suffered deep trauma and want to end it. The evidence left behind by her mother opens up many other cases. They track down the families that Blackwell had manipulated. Gradually, a network of dozens of names, millions of dollars, and a series of missing assets cases was uncovered. During the investigation, Nathan finds himself changed. Every page of documents turned. Every meeting with another victim. Every time Montgomery smiled and comforted someone. He felt like he was no longer just the one betrayed. He is becoming someone who stands up for those who cannot. 6 months after Eleanor's death, Vanessa was arrested at a luxury resort in Mexico. Dyed hair, fake name, Canadian passport. Nathan stood quietly and watched as she was brought into court in handcuffs. She turned away, not daring to look him in the eyes. What about Anthony and Diana? Both accepted a cooperation agreement, revealing Blackwell's entire network in exchange for a lighter sentence. The truth has emerged. Justice is near. But for Nathan, what was more critical was that he did not back down. Late that afternoon, Nathan returned to his mother's old house. The house his grandparents left behind, where he grew up, where all the memories of sacrifice, the poor but warm meals, and the evenings when his mother sat by the window, knitting and listening to the news, are all still here. Even though the house will be sold for charity according to his will, he still doesn't have the courage to do that. Not because of material value, but because this place is all that remains of the woman who has always stood behind him. Quietly, steady like a mountain. Thomas Newberry was waiting on the porch. Still a calm man, with deep eyes as if he understood everything, he gave Nathan a small wooden box, discolored over time. "Your mother left this behind. Told me I should give it to you only when everything is over." Nathan took it, his hand shaking slightly. He sat down on the old wooden steps and opened the box. Inside was no gold, silver, or papers, just a few faded photos. His parents' wedding photo, his 6th birthday with a small cake his mother made, a picture of him standing in front of the company's first truck, his mother standing behind him, smiling, a handwritten note, his father's Sunday sauce recipe, the words, "Don't add salt before tasting," with the familiar exclamation mark. At the bottom is my mother's silver wedding ring, frayed at the edges, but still intact, and one last letter. Nathan opened the letter. The voice in his head seemed to echo in his mother's voice. "Dear, by now you probably know the whole truth. I'm sorry for not telling you sooner, but as a mother, I'm the one who always wants to shield you from the ugliness of this world, from people who don't deserve to be called family. But now you know, and you are stronger than I thought. The truth does not destroy you. On the contrary, you have stood up from it, and that makes me feel at ease." The following line is shaky, as if written in her final days. "Now that I'm no longer with you physically, you must know you're not alone. Family isn't just blood, it's the people who stand by you when everything falls apart. It's people like Thomas, like Olivia. People you've never called your own, but will never betray you. Hold on to that, baby." Nathan put the letter back in the box. He looked up at Thomas, his eyes stinging. "Thank you, sir, for always being there for her and me." Thomas smiled sadly. "She's very proud of you, Nathan. Not because of what you've done, but because you still have your father's heart." At that moment, a car stopped in front of the gate. A young woman walked down, thin figure, light curly brown hair, eyes that were both shy and familiar. She approached, her voice quiet but clear. "Hello, I'm Olivia." Nathan was a bit stunned. Olivia, the name her mother mentioned in the letter. The woman Eleanor helped when she fled a violent marriage. Her mother helped her change her name, find a job at a charity organization, and since then, they have considered each other as mother and daughter. "I've heard a lot about you," Olivia said, holding her hand. She said, "You are the only one who inherited your father's integrity." Nathan held her hand, and he smiled for the first time in months. A light, warm, not forced smile. They sat on the porch with Thomas talking about Eleanor, about small stories, about the time she ruined the boiled eggs but still said, "I did it on purpose," logically, about how she counted every penny to buy Diana's first dress without saying anything. When Nathan turned out the lights that night, he sat on his mother's old couch. The wind blew through the door frame, carrying with it the scent of lavender that she once planted beside the fence. His heart was strangely peaceful. For the first time since his mother died, Nathan felt like he was home. 1 year after his mother's death, Nathan stood silently in front of the shiny granite plaque where the words were engraved, "Eleanor Russo Memorial Garden, for those who have been hurt and are finding themselves." Lavender and tulips, mother's favorites, bloom brilliantly amid the lush green grass. Stone benches are scattered around the winding path. This is not just a garden. This is a place for people to step in and know that no matter how often life falls apart, there is always a way back. Next to him is Laura Montgomery, no longer the investigator with her name attached to the thick file and the interrogation room lights. It was Laura, the woman he had learned to trust, slowly, patiently, like people piecing together broken pieces of glass. Love is not rushed. There is also no need to make far-fetched promises, but it is there, sustainably. They stood next to each other, saying nothing. Just hold hands. Behind are Thomas and Olivia, a new family, no birth certificate or blood relatives needed, just a choice, that they stay together when the storm passes. Nathan still keeps the old house. He didn't sell it like the will said, because even though Mother wanted to use it to do good for the community, he knew this house itself was the foundation for a greater good, the organization that bears her name. Qui Eleanor Russo Jianshin Thuk Jivao Hoatjong. With the support of survivors like Olivia and advocates like Laura, the organization provides legal, temporary housing, and financial counseling to women escaping domestic violence and financial scams. One Sunday night, in the old kitchen, the smell of tomato sauce spread throughout the house. Nathan flips through his father's notes to cook the correct Sunday sauce recipe. Olivia helps cut onions. Thomas plays classical jazz. Laura sat on the porch, reading a book with the little dog they had just adopted. It's not a dream scene, it's reality. A reality that he had to exchange with tears, hurt, and courage. Inside the drawer near the kitchen was still my mother's last letter. I don't need to reread it, because I've memorized every word in my heart. What matters is not blood, who holds your hand when everyone else lets go. Now I understand. Family isn't the people who share your last name, it's the people who choose to come into your life and stay. Some wounds come from strangers, but there are also much deeper wounds from loved ones. No one is prepared for the betrayal of family, spouses, and those who held our hands through the storm. But then we realize that not everyone named family will stay with us forever. Nathan has lost everything, his trust, money, and blood. But in that pain, he found something he had never fully understood. Family is not about blood, it's about choice. Those who choose to stay when everyone else leaves. His story is not a journey to reclaim his property, but a journey to reclaim himself. Reclaim freedom, self-respect, and the right to be happy with those who deserve it. And what about you? Have you ever felt left behind in your own home? Ever choose to stay silent until the truth can no longer be buried? Please share your story in the comments section, because who knows, what you've been through might help someone else feel less alone. If you feel this story deserves to be spread, please like to support stories of real people, real things with emotional value. Comment, let us hear your story. Share to spread the lesson of courage and true love. Subscribe to the channel to not miss the journeys that leave you speechless, but then secretly smile at the end. Because sometimes a small story touches the most significant part of our hearts. See you again in the following story.